I still remember where I was the first time I heard about the concept of uncountable infinities. I was 16 and I was taking a class at Colby College near where I went to high school in Waterville, Maine. It was a class on an introduction to abstract mathematics with Professor Ben Mathis. And I should preface all of this, perhaps redundantly at this point, by saying I was a huge dork in high school. I would sit there in class or in meetings when I was bored and daydream by counting upwards in perfect cubes. 1, 8, 27, 64, 125, 216, 343, 512, 729, 1,000, 13, 31, etc. When this is your social location as a high schooler, the one place where you can go and be cool is the local Unitarian Universalist congregation. Very thankful for that. When I found out that OWL is an abstinence-based curriculum for teenagers, to me personally, that felt very redundant to learn. So here I was in Intro to Abstract Mathematics, having been told the year before by my calculus professor that languages make the world go round. I was trying to decide whether to study languages or more math. He said, languages make the world go round, but math is where the money is. I ended up being a Chinese major. I'm comfortable enough with that at this point to be accepting of the trade-off, even when I found out this summer that a college classmate of mine working at Google was making 18 times my salary as youth programs coordinator. The way that I choose to look at it is we both have the freedom to do what we love. So this Intro to Abstract Math course had gotten somehow onto set theory. And one of the first things that we learned about was bijection between sets. Bijection means that if you have set A, for example, all of the natural numbers, all integers, 1, 2, 3, 4, and set B, for example, we'll say even numbers, 2, 4, 6, 8, etc. Bijection means that for every element in set A, you can map it to exactly one element in set B. So 1 would map to 2, 2 would map to 4, 3 would map to 6, and so on. And that is one of the ways that you can prove there are exactly the same number of elements in two sets. You just establish that those two sets have bijection. And I was sitting there kind of having a hard time wrapping my head around the idea that there are provably exactly as many integers, 1, 2, 3, 4, as even numbers, 2, 4, 6, 8. Because if 1, 2, 3, and 4 on the one hand and 2 and 4 on the other hand are part of these different sets, don't you have twice as many numbers in that first set? And I kept going back, I went back and forth a couple times with the professor, being like, I'm sorry, look, I can see the list. There's gonna be twice as many in that list of integers. And he said, well, show me an element then in that list that cannot be bijected onto the other set. And I certainly couldn't think of one, and I couldn't think of a way to disprove that idea. So I had to kind of accept that, okay, there's going to be as many elements in the set of integers as in the set of even numbers, and probably it was a good bet that if you were counting by 3s or 4s or however many in that other set, there were still going to be just as many numbers. So I was sitting there wrestling with that idea that you could prove there were the same number of elements in each of these sets, when my world was rocked once again by the ability to prove that not only were those equal and infinite, but you could furthermore show there was another kind of set that had more than infinity elements in it. You could take one of these sets that had infinity numbers in it and prove that there was a set with more in it. Georg Cantor did this actually back in 1891 with what is called the diagonal argument. So it seems like you could biject any set with infinite numbers onto another set. If you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way out to infinity, then you just keep adding numbers right onto this other set to biject. You've got infinity of them. You can always do that, right? No. He managed to create a set in which he started out by creating a set in which each element is a set containing an infinite sequence of numbers in binary. So his first set was like all zeros, 0, 0, 0, 0. His second set was all ones, 1, 1, 1, 1. His third set maybe was alternating, 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1. Different patterns, different randomizations, and so forth, such that his set was all sets of infinite sequences of binary numbers. And then he said, all right, there you go. That's that set. It's got infinite elements. And now I'm going to define an additional set that is opposite or complementary to an element in each of those existing sets. And so it will never be part of this infinite set that I've just described. So even though that one is infinite, I've created something that's not in it. I've created something more than infinity. So if you've ever told somebody, I love you infinity plus 1, you can thank Georg Cantor for proving that that's possible. Although I'm not sure if that would really be in the mood that you're looking for if you're telling somebody that you love them that much. So a set which contains the element he defined can never be bijected back onto that original set. And so it's mathematically provable that it has more than infinity elements. And furthermore, you can construct a set with an infinite number of elements that each have their own infinity of elements. And when you do that, that is what is called an uncountable infinity. So the set of integers, 1, 2, 3, 4, that's called a countable infinity. Real numbers, the set of real numbers would be an example of an uncountable infinity because you can go, okay, we've got 1, and then we've got 0.1, and then we've got 0.01, and we've got 0.001. That can go on until infinity, and then you can go down an infinite number of times with those sorts of numbers. So that's an uncountable infinity. And you can't even just back up and say, well, we'll just create a set that has all the sets in it, and that will be infinity. We'll say infinity is the set of all the sets that you're describing because there is a concept called a power set, which includes all the possible subsets of any existing set of numbers, and that is by definition bigger than that set. So any set that you can create, there's a way to say that there is a bigger possible set, a set with an element that wasn't already contained. And yes, you can create a power set of a power set. I looked into that. You know that game kids play where they just keep saying, why? I used to really like that game. And this knowing that there's always a set you can create that has another element, that has more elements, even if you start out with infinity or infinities. This is why when I go into a meeting here at church or in another organization or at home and it's time to maybe consider another point of view or compromise, I am totally willing to do that because I know that even if I knew infinity things, there would still be something out there that I didn't know. It would still be possible to recombine the things, to bring in something else that wasn't known, that I didn't know. I don't happen to know infinity things, but even if I did, it's humbling to know that there would always, provably, be more. So the class ended. I came out from the mud building, the mathematics building there at Colby, and my dad picked me up to drive me back to high school. And I was telling him about this countable versus uncountable infinities thing. I was really excited about it. And he says, well, I think in the end, it's all part of a greater infinity. And I have to admit, my initial reaction to this was nerd rage like I have never felt before. I was like, wow, I just told you how they're different. They're provably more than just this greater infinity, however you want to define that. Look, pull over. I will show you my notebook. It'll be a quarter of an hour of your billable time. I'll give you the $75, and then you can finish bringing me to school. I didn't actually say any of that. I just kind of took a moment and reflected, and I could see that what he was getting at was that no matter how big you make your picture, no matter how much is involved, set-wise or cosmically or planetarily, you can always draw the circle wider. You can always draw the circle in a way that brings more in. And ultimately, this was an image, this was a concept that very much informed my own theology, informed my own sense of the universe and of who we are and how we participate in it. And so I was very grateful to have this opportunity, to have this conversation with him that opened the door for talking about our respective beliefs. It's not easy to do. It was something that for the two of us usually only happened around nature or sports. And I think conversations about belief in our congregations can also be difficult to initiate sometimes. And so I hope that concepts and ideas here that may spark something for you are ones that you'll discuss with friends and family and that will create other connections or spark other concepts that you want to play with, other realms of life that you may wish to have meaningful conversations about. Sometimes that's how they get started, and that is great. My colleague here in Atlanta, Kim Palmer, and I have had some discussions coming out from these sorts of scientific realms for all of the background that we share. She's a chaplain, and we've both gone through the ministerial formation process for Unitarian Universalism. We've both done our chaplaincy work and been parts of UU congregations, but what we come back to are these kinds of science-y universal questions, including about the idea that the universe is expanding at an accelerating rate and may someday be so vast with everything so spread out that there's just no more light and heat and life. I remember talking with her about this and having her say that she was open to the idea that even an ultimately expanded universe, as we can picture it, has something more within or without, that the history of our learning about our world shows there tends to be more that we find out about as we go along, and this was what she took solace in when she thought about the possibility of that kind of a universe. And I take solace in the idea that there are always more infinities, countable or uncountable. This video that we saw this morning, I wonder simultaneously, each time it zooms out farther, how can there be more? How can there be anything left? You've shown so much. Planets and solar systems and galaxies and more galaxies and clusters of galaxies going out and out and out. We have to have found it all at this point, right? Like, how can there be any more? Simultaneously, history says that each time we think we have found it all, we've created a paradigm for ourselves of the world that we live in that explains it all, that we find something more, something both smaller than we knew and bigger. I hope that science will teach us both humility and empiricism as we approach our lives, as we approach our religious communities. I believe that we are called to fight for the role of science socially, societally, that in things like stem cell research and the genetic idea that differences between races are not factual, are not empirical, we will stand up for those, that we will take social justice stances for making sure empiricism is well represented in our civil conversations, in our civic society. I think that that is one of the things that we are strongest at and called to as Unitarian Universalists. My goal, I say to folks, is getting up to data societally. And friends who are in more data-driven fields are curious how I, as a minister, can want us to get up to data when they see kind of that role as transcending data, to look at mystery and awe and wonder and meaning. And I say, as a liberal minister in the southern United States, I see all too often the people and the legislation influenced not by the transcendence of numbers and data, but the ignorance of them. And it's what drives me to want to transcend data, but to get to data first, to get up to data and then go beyond it, to both save and savor the world. That's the saving part of saving and savoring the world, is getting us up to making decisions collectively based on information as opposed to superstition, and then to savor that world by having the mystery and the awe and the transcendent immanent among us. We do these things in a religious community because we need to be reminded of them. We need to have the opportunity to practice them on a regular basis. E equals mc squared is in a textbook somewhere, like most physics equations. We can look it up and utilize it when needed. But our principles, our sense of awe, these things must be practiced regularly. We can't set them in a textbook and say, well, they'll be there when we need them, because they atrophy and we risk losing them if they're not here for us, if we're not practicing them on a regular basis, if we're not committing ourselves to coming together each week and having daily practices where we get better at them. We have to have places where we can celebrate the meaning of these tools, of these equations and theories that we work with, because otherwise they become dry tools of craft and they lose their wonderment for us. Although a word of advice to the young people listening, to both hone your wonderment and your tools, lest your friends end up making 18 times what you do. Like Reverend Rosemary Bray McNatt, the president of the Star King School for Ministry, I hope that we come because both spirit and reason are dear to our hearts. Let us be here because we can make mistakes while still being held accountable for doing our best. Let us be here because every time we think our set of sets contains all the sets, something happens to prove to us it is impossible for us as humans, and to reopen our eyes in gratitude to the transcending mystery and wonder of our world and our universe. May we each be filled with this gratitude and wonder all the days of our lives. Peace, salam, shalom, and may it be so.